And we're live.
Welcome to the Node.js Community Technical Steering Committee meeting, November 1st, 2017. We're going to follow our standard agenda. So first of all, are there any announcements that people have to make this week? Okay, I'll take that as a no, so we'll move on to the standard items on the agenda. The first one is Node.js Node Stream, move prefix files into internal streams. I'm just going to take a quick look to see who added that to the list. We do have a smaller group today, so we'll see if we have anybody who's in the loop on that one or not. Okay. Scrolling down to see if I can see who added to the list. Okay, from looking at the comments at the end, it basically says, October 2nd, which is a little bit a while ago. It says what needs to be waited on, still has 3 CTC approvals and no objections. So I think this is really an awareness. So basically, if people are, everybody should go take a look, and if you have any objections, file them into the issue. I'm just going to take some notes along that slide. Added to agenda for awareness. Please review comment in issue. Taking off agenda until the question. Okay, anybody else comments or things to talk about on that particular issue? Okay, moving on to the next agenda item, so the issues under Node.js TSC. So doc initial version of strategic initiatives. So I added that to the agenda. It's TSC 399. The idea there is, there's been some discussions about focusing a little bit more on some of the strategic initiatives that we actually already have underway. This just adds a list of them to the TSC repo. One area of discussion, I think, was around whether it should include working groups or just initiatives. Miles had suggested, somebody had suggested ones that kind of include the scope of working groups. I'd added them in. Miles suggested that actually it should be more actual initiatives, not sort of general things, which is, like release and build and stuff, ongoing working group things. I definitely agree with that, so I removed them again. I don't know if anybody else has thoughts or comments in terms of the scope of what we should or shouldn't include in that list.
Michael, so thank you for the initial work on this. I think it's really great. I still think, I'm just double checking where it's at right now, but so there was two different things I was gonna say is like, one is I still think it can maybe even be scoped a little bit more to specific projects rather than higher level stuff. Some of the examples here, when I'm looking, would be so like moderation is still like a pretty broad topic as opposed to like specific things with moderation. So I know, for example, we have a need to figure out stuff around reporting regarding leadership. So that was kind of more of the idea I had of like a tighter scope on it. Or as Rich is saying, getting the moderation team up and running. The other thing that is also is like a lot of these initiatives were rounded up based on, you know, just kind of like what's going on right now, as opposed to people having explicitly volunteered. And so I'm not sure if it makes sense to add things to this list that haven't had people explicitly volunteer that they want to champion and have what they're working on be considered a strategic initiative. I'm flexible on that, but I'd like to hear kind of what other people think about that. If, you know, we should try to collect all what appears to currently be initiatives, or if we should wait for individuals to submit them.
I'd like to see a definition of what a strategic initiative is. What is it about these things that means that they are things that the TSC is directly concerned about? Because I could think of a bunch of things, for example, that we're doing in build, like testing shared libraries, and that Node can be built as a shared library. And those kinds of things that are, you know, they're these chunky tasks that need to be done, but and maybe the TSC wants to care about that, but you know, what is it about these things that make them strategic? And if we define that, do some drop off and others come on?
Yeah, the difficulty, I think the challenge we have is in the overlap with the working groups, which is an example of the one you just talked about, right? Like that I could easily see being one of these if we needed a way to make sure that it wasn't sort of forgotten / missed. With it being in the scope of a working group, that working group might, you know, be the right place to sort of focus on that. But that one in particular actually is, I'm not sure, I think that could be a good candidate for, yeah, we want to have better testing for, you know, the shared library and static library builds.
And debug builds, I think, go in the same thing, basically increasing the permutations of our tests to more than just operating system and architecture.
Right. So, I mean, actually, I could, you know, if we decide that that's important, which I think it you know, those are two specific instances, so we could scope it down to, you know, specific instance like that, or, you know, I guess, you know, Miles' first comment is, should we actually scope it to something more general, or try and do it as this, you know, specific ones like that, right?
So two different thoughts. One, you know, there's the comment that you had made earlier in there about wanting to kind of have a running update at the beginning of meetings about these initiatives.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking a little bit about the comparison from that to what we used to do with the stand-up that we removed because we didn't really find it made sense anymore. And part of the reason why the stand-up stopped making sense was because of how many people we started having on the committee, and it just, in my opinion, doesn't scale to such a large group. I'm concerned that we could run into a similar problem with the strategic initiatives, that if we start having too many of them, it starts becoming hard for us to do continued updates or be motivated to do continued updates. I'm flexible on that, but that's just kind of like a gut feeling I have on it.
That we could address, though, by rotating, like, you know, some percentage, which is, you know, go through only a quarter of them or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I guess it's like we you know, it's that, do you want to take a smaller set, but say from this list, let's, you know, it's a very concrete list. Which of these would we drop out if we wanted to make the numbers smaller? And then we can see, you know, does that actually make sense to drop those out? And if yes, then great. If not, then we can sort of come back to, well, how do we handle the number that, you know, if there's a number of equal peers, how do we handle that number if it's too large?
Mm-hmm. I think one other thing I was thinking about, and I'm not sure if this should be a category or not, but when initially proposing this idea, I was considering that a strategic initiative was going to be something that, you know, if the project didn't become aligned on it or come up with a solution in the next, 1 to 2 years, it puts the project at risk. Modules would be an example of this. OpenSSL would be an example of this. Just looking at the list again. Our governance would be an example of this. Core Promise APIs would be an example of this. CVE management, I think, is something that's good for us to be doing, but I'm not convinced, that if we don't do it, the project could be in jeopardy. Error messages, again, something that I think the project could be in jeopardy. But on the flip side, HTTP2 and an API are not necessarily things that put the project at risk by not doing them. I guess you could say that an API would because of the changes to how we do native modules. But I think that perhaps that's worth considering being one of the facets of a strategic initiative. But I'm not, again, I'm more just trying to like restate some of my original thoughts, not necessarily stating that this has to be the direction we take it.
Right. Yeah, I take that. That's certainly like those ones are ones that we should highlight. Things I guess what I was thinking when I looked at some of them is it would be good for us to provide support and visibility for some of the other things. Like if I look at workers, right? That's kind of one where I don't know if it's going to cause, put the project in jeopardy or not, but it's something that I was hoping we could support because it's interesting and potentially quite important, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess the other, we can always try things. And I guess the question is, do we start with a smaller list or bigger list? And, if there's really nothing new to say on things, I think a number of them will go by quickly, right?
I guess like perhaps my like biggest gut fear is that if we have too many of them and they are not being run by champions who are incredibly engaged in the process of making something a strategic initiative, that we potentially water down the concept. And it's very likely that this is a unfounded fear. But that's kind of my biggest concern with having such a large list.
Right. I wonder if there's, we can certainly, if they're not being actively pushed, then we can drop them from the list. And I guess the question when something like that happens, if they're important enough, we should find a different champion to make sure something does happen on it, right?
Mm-hmm. Also, there was the question I posed in the issue, like, does the champion need to be a member of the TSC?
I think we should have somebody on the TSC who is I don't know if champion's the right word, but we need somebody who's the who's the link to the TSC, who can help to make things happen, and is maybe not, like you said in the past, not necessarily doing all the work, but has the link and the connection to the TSC to help facilitate things. For example, modules, right? You've kind of volunteered to be the champion for that one. And even if Brad does a lot of the work, it's good to have the link, somebody on the TSC who can actually push that and help get whatever support is needed or attention, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of a, like in my mind, here are the things that are broader in scope, more forward-looking, and making sure that they get the support they need and attention. So, for example, if like the OpenSSL one, we don't get an update in, a couple months, we should probably be saying, wait a sec, what's going on there? And because it's on the list, that'll remind us to check on it.
So, we've got 9 members on the call right now. I have a feeling like we need a few more members of the TSC to be around to kind of get further on this.
Sure. So why don't we take it back to GitHub for now? It would be good, so if people can go and discuss there, it would be good to make progress on that. So please go and comment there. I don't know if we can. What else? Anyway, we'll hopefully people will. All on TSC, please review such comment as scope. And if Miles, maybe you can make some different suggestions of, what the list might look like if we took different, some of the characteristics you were suggesting, right?
I think one of the easiest ways to do it might be to literally remove everything from the list and elicit suggestions from the TSC at large. But we have a good list, so I'm not really sure what the best way forward. I think maybe taking Rod's point there and coming up with a stronger definition may help us scope it a bit more.
Okay. Work on a stronger definition as well. Okay. Okay, so let's take that one back to GitHub. The next one is 383, which is a proposal to form a governance working group. I think, Miles, you were suggesting in some of the discussion that we try and find a time to get together. I don't remember exactly where that ended up.
James has created a doodle with time suggestions running out into the next, like 2 weeks, with a bit of a block there without suggested dates around NodeConf.eu. So I guess to anyone who's on the call who's interested in getting involved who hasn't filled it out, the link is in the issue. So if you go to the bottom of the page, there's a doodle link. In Dishaw's last comment, I'm going to drop it into the comments. So please, feel free to fill that out if you want to be involved in this.
Okay.
Aside from that, I don't think there's really any update.
Okay. Open set up first meeting. Interested, please fill in your availability. Okay. Okay, so the next issue is Node.js admin. At a fixed case of extensions on internal docs and move COC to admin repo. So I think the main question here is if people are comfortable moving the code of conduct out of the TSC repo and into the admin repo instead. There was some suggestions of that might not be a good idea, so added it on to the agenda for discussion. So I think myself and Miles have both weighed in there as being in favor. Is there anybody else we have today who think it's not a good idea to move it out of the TSC and into the common admin, or other comments, thoughts, suggestions?
James had pushed back. So there was kind of 2 different things here. Let me get it one more time. So the internal docs is like right now we have the moderation guidelines inside of the moderation policies inside of admin, but the code of conduct lives in the TSC. James is in support of updating and permanently moving the moderation policy there and having it live in one place, but wanted to keep the code of conduct in the TSC repo. There's a comment in inside of the TSC repo where I sent a pull request to Node.js/node, Node.js/TSC, and Node.js/admin as a first pass. And so, you know, I don't really know that we can move that forward too much without James on the call because he had objected.
Yeah, I'm seeing this, the discussion is in the TSC repo pull request number 395. It's worth noting that there is provisions in the new moderation, and I think it's just the moderation policy, provisions for projects, both working groups and I guess the top level projects maintaining their own, even if we share a root one. But yeah, it'd be worth hearing what the objections are from James.
Yeah, my main point is if it's the same, it should be in the common place. If there's a delta, then yeah, there's no problem having it in the repo. Although it would be nice if that delta was then maybe called out as a delta as opposed to a copy.
If I recall from his original comments, his major pushback was just around the fact that we just moved it and we have links everywhere pointing to the TSC repo, and that this would just create another level of indirection. For myself, you know, since everyone's sharing these documents right now and there's no expectation of having differences between the TSC and the ComCom's code of conduct, it seems like for that reason it should be in a mid, but then like further having it in two places just seems like ripe for things going in an odd direction or creating inconsistencies.
Well, James's point there is that the other point is that he thinks that the TSC will be more directly responsible for ensuring its enforcement within the technical project. How about we defer this one until a meeting where James is on? Yep. Personally, I'm fairly indifferent about where it lives. I take James's point there, but I also like the efficiency of same doc, one place. So either way, I could go.
Okay, so let's say we'll defer until we have a meeting with James, and until then take discussion back to GitHub. Okay, so that's actually what we had on the agenda for this week. Does anybody else have any other items that they want to discuss since we have extra time? Okay, I guess if not, then let's give everybody back some time back. Everybody can stay on after we close the recording, but thanks for everybody who tuned in. Sorry, actually, I forgot to see if there was a question and answer, so let's do that before we end. So let's see, are there any questions in the issue? We'll give people a few minutes to add them, so you can add them to the original issue if you're watching on YouTube or listening on YouTube or in the IRC. I'll log into IRC.
There's nothing on the IRC.
No. Okay, and I don't see anything on the issue. Maybe we'll just wait one more minute. Okay, I still don't see anything, so okay, we'll call it for today. Thank you to everybody who tuned in, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks.